Welcome, everyone, to a very special global read. This is our second global read for kids and company, meaning kids and their families and friends and everyone that gathers around them in their daily life. We're really pleased that today we're bringing you a unique story, but it's not only one story, it's a real collection of stories. And it's from Africa, the whole continent of Africa, perhaps not every single country, but there's stories that are shared between many people. Not only stories, but they're also proverbs. And I find the proverbs really exciting because they're these unique words of wisdom. And the book is called Wisdom Tales of Africa, and it was compiled by Magdalene Sacranie. And Magdalene has been a part of the Charter for Compassion probably since the very beginning, back around 2014, but probably she was involved even before that. And she lived in Malawi for a period of time, and she'll tell you a little bit about that. Madeline's going to be joined by two other people, both of them related to the Charter. In fact, both of them are members of our Board of Trustees, and both of them live on the continent of Africa. Babs is in South Africa, and Moses is in Zimbabwe. And I'm going to let each of the three people introduce themselves, and then they'll get right into the content and the heart of this whole global read. So first, I'll turn it over to Magdalene.
Hello, everyone. Lovely to see you, Marilyn, and thanks to you and Lynn, of course, for making this a reality today and bringing the anthology of wisdom tales from Africa to the Charter for Compassion. And it will join the global library and be available for everyone to read and enjoy. I could go on to talk about it more just now, or do you want everyone else to introduce themselves?
Well, what gave you the idea, Magdalene, to write this or to compile it?
How long I was thinking about the answer today, actually, Marilyn. And the fact of the matter is that I remember, in fact, my earliest memory is in our house in London, shaking out coins from cardboard huts, which my mother had distributed to every one of the 3,000 members in our congregational church in South London, just after the war, and were rattling with pennies, halfpennies, which in turn supported the London Missionary Society. And at the heart of the LMS lay Malawi, which of course in those days was called Nyasaland, and the work of David Livingstone. So I think actually my association with this beautiful country in Central Africa goes right back to those roots anyway. But when I'd finished training as a physiotherapist, I was and had 2 years experience in a London hospital. I signed up for voluntary service overseas, and they immediately asked me, well, we have 3 projects to offer you, one in Malawi, Central Africa, one in India, and one in East Africa. And there was no hesitation, of course, because I felt already familiar with Malawi, which used to be called Nyasaland before independence. And so off I went, and I worked in a leprosy control project there for 2.5 years. And that was a seminal experience for a 23-year-old. It was I was never the same again after that experience of working in Malawi. But whilst I was there, of course, I went into the only bookshop in town and saw my father's magazine propped up against the cash register. And I was so taken aback to see his magazine, which he edited and published out of a small office in off the Strand in London, and it had been part of my childhood. I looked up and I said, "Oh, how many copies of the magazine do you sell here in Malawi?" And of course, I looked up into Aziz Sacranie's eyes, and the rest was history, really. I mean, we were married 2.5 years later, and we had a long adventure. But the roots of the Sacranie family were in Malawi. Aziz was a third generation Sacranie. So all for the rest of since then, we've been supporting different projects in the country. And, you know, it suddenly occurred to me that there was no anthology of retold stories. There was no easy to read book of wisdom tales from around the continent of Africa, nothing reflecting the whole of Africa. And so about 15 years ago, I think now, this was published in Scotland, where we were by now living. And it's been a very interesting journey with the book. It coincided with me retiring from physiotherapy, really, and being asked to introduce primary school children around Scotland to the idea of being global citizens. And I would go around with a storytelling event, and it seemed to be very popular. Children would ask lots of questions, and then the parents would have to buy the book. And we ended up with making a significant amount of money for the Children's Fund of Malawi, which is the charity that was behind the book from the beginning.
Right. Well, you know, one of the people here, and Moses' name appears on your screen, but you don't see him. Maybe for a few seconds, we'll ask him to, there he is. He's having a little difficulty with his internet connection, and Moses is in Zimbabwe, and I'm going to invite him to introduce himself. But Moses wrote the foreword for this book. And so Moses, I'll turn this to you.
Thank you so much, Magdalene, and thank you so much, Magdalene, for your contribution and for the beautiful story that you shared with your experiences in Malawi. Just to give an introduction of myself, my name is Moses Machipisa, and I sit on the board of trustees for the Charter of Compassion, and I'm also the secretary for a network which is called the Ubuntu Lead Global Network. So the Ubuntu Global Network is a network of young leaders from around the world. I lead the African chapter, and these leaders who are inspired by the Ubuntu philosophy, I am because you are. So just to give this context and perspective, also reflecting on the, you know, the book that you wrote, Magdalene, Wisdom Tales from Africa. I think this book really captures the spirit of Ubuntu, you know, through storytelling culturally. This was a way of conveying from one generation to the other, but it's more importantly giving perspective where the idea that takes a village to raise a child, that you are not an individual in isolation, but human being a human being about connecting, relating to the other. So I think through these tales, using the animals, which are part of what we have here, the rich diversity in the fauna and flora. I think that also captures the imagination of young ones. When they read the stories of lions, of bears, they get to be immersed in this, not only to be immersed in the story itself, but to know the wisdom in this.
Yeah, I think, well, we knew that he was having trouble, so it seems that he got knocked off. Moses had mentioned in his conversation there that he is in Zimbabwe and he's involved with the Ubuntu organization. And right now he's starting in his own community a school. And I think, Moses, you're back. And we were having a lot of difficulty understanding you. So because of the internet connection. So I think if you could keep an eye on the chat, we'll let you know when your internet is making it almost impossible to understand what you're saying. But I know that you were speaking about Ubuntu and the power of its regard for all common humanity, and how I am you, you are me. But I'm hoping that maybe you'll be able to finish up on that thought.
Thank you. And apologies, my internet not the best. So I was just talking about this African philosophy and how it is captured within this tradition of storytelling. How the vivid imagination and pictures that come to a children's mind when they read these stories, are taken to another world, where they, relate not only to the stories, but also to the meanings, the deep meanings of wisdom that are embodied through these stories. And I think this is what gives the worldview of Ubuntu, because the character within the stories, they listen, when they face the air, which is known for its approach, with the lion for its might. All these characters, as they are captured within these stories, they speak to this idea of how do we teach Ubuntu through these wisdom tales. And I'm so excited and thrilled that Magdalene, Africa is 54 countries, and you have managed to capture stories from different African countries and into one book. So I'm told now the internet is not so good, so I'll just pack it here for now.
Thanks, Moses. And 54 countries, and I dare say that if most people around the world were asked if they could name even 5 of the countries, they would be feeling pretty good about it. But let's hear from another country that's south of Moses and happens to be South Africa, and another Charter Board of Trustee member, Babs, who's in Cape Town. And so, Babs, if you'd make an introduction.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Marilyn. It's such a pleasure to be here today to join you all and to engage in what I think is a really beautifully crafted book that brings together the wisdoms, obviously, but also what I think is the heart of Africa. So my name is not Babs, that's my nickname, but my name is Babalwa Ngongolo, and I'm saying that just to please my parents. But that is my full name. And I am from Cape Town, South Africa. I live and I work in Cape Town, South Africa, but I grew up in a little city called East London, which is in the Eastern Cape of the Eastern Cape province of South Africa. I'm a social justice educator. A lot of my work is around how do we get young people to think of themselves, as you'd spoken earlier, Magdalene, as global citizens. And I think there's such a powerful concept that we're speaking about here, which is that idea of Ubuntu. And Ubuntu actually is a concept of concepts. I think it's one that encapsulates so many different things. It encapsulates compassion, it encapsulates care. There's so many elements to Ubuntu, but I think what I really enjoy about what Wisdom Tales does, and I think you spoke a little, Magdalene, about the rationale and how the book came about, and what you did with it. It really, to me, resonates that idea of storytelling and the power that it has to help us become global citizens, right? To see the other, to welcome the other, to acknowledge the other. There's a term in South Africa, in isiZulu, it's a greeting term. And so when we greet each other, we say sawubona, which literally means I see you. But I like to go deep into that. And what I think it really encapsulates is this idea of the idea that you have come into existence for me. Before I met you today, Magdalene, or anyone else, I didn't know that you existed. I didn't know your story, your histories, who you were, what you did. But once I meet you and I truly see you, you come into existence. You truly become part of who I am now in my story and who I am. And I get to learn from you and bring into my own identity and my own awareness who you are also as an individual. And I think that's the real beauty of what we're going to speak about today, is that idea of how do we connect with each other and see each other and see the humanness in each other. And so we can really build, I think, what we're looking to build, which is a society that is deeply informed, but deeply caring about the other. And so I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to join you all and to have this wonderful conversation. Thank you so much.
Great. And I'm wondering if I know that there are some talking points that were prepared for today, and I'm not sure, I don't have those talking points in front of me, but I'm wondering if Lynn, if you might have those and maybe start us going with some discussion around particular stories. And your mic is off.
I just realized that my mic is off. I will get those. I'm afraid I did not have them up to view. So just one moment, please.
Problem. You know, I first of all, I have to say the book is absolutely gorgeous. It's a hardback and a soft cover book, and the charter's going to be able to distribute the books. But I'm wondering, what's the favorite? I'm going to start easy. What's the favorite proverb for any one of you that's a part of that book? Because their proverbs are interspersed throughout the book. And I just, every time that I saw it, it almost became meditative, that, you know, it was something deep that you could think about. So I'm just wondering if anyone has a favorite.
I have a favorite.
Okay.
God gives blessings to all men. If man had to distribute them, many would go without.
Mm.
And we know that that comes after the story about how wisdom was spread around the world. It's the first story in the book. And the spider tries to hang on at all costs to his bag of wisdom. And eventually he thinks he's going to hide it in a great big pot and keep it away from anybody who might like to pinch his wisdom. But of course, that was a piece of nonsense. And Nancy the spider lost his footing altogether as he was making his way across the river, and the wisdom flowed out from the pot and down to the sea, and it was distributed everywhere around the world.
Yeah,
So that's one of my favorite proverbs.
when I first read that proverb, I thought about, I don't know if people know, a children's writer, Tommy Di Fiola, and he wrote a story about Stregonona, which has its roots in Italian storytelling, and how she just had this pot of spaghetti, and that she kind of kept it there very carefully. And one day someone opened the lid, and the same thing, spaghetti just kept coming out and making its way through the house, down through the village, and everyone was able to get part of it.
Share in the spaghetti.
So Moses, I know that you were going to be somewhat of a moderator here, so I'm wondering if you could just start us with a question, and we'll let you know if there's a problem with your internet.
So yes, Magdalene, I've got some few questions for you. I'll switch off my video so that I can. So I just want you to maybe to give the context of the tradition that you found in coming up with these stories. For like to know how who was the audience for these stories, and who did the storytelling of these profoundly meaningful and deep tales.
Do you know, Moses, I found these stories in all sorts of different books, actually, and places. And you must know of Lawrence van der Post. Bubs, do you know who I'm talking about?
Yes.
He was in South Africa, and he had a nanny who used to tell him tales, and he wrote in his later life, recorded a lot of these stories. So, for instance, the story about the herder and his cattle and marrying the girl on the moonbeam, that came from one of Lawrence van der Post's book, Venture into the Interior, I think, or we had so many books around the house for years, just because my husband Aziz had been managed a bookshop in Malawi, so we had a lot of resource material. And with 4 children, storytelling were, of course, a popular and important feature of every bedtime. And beyond that, we all love a good story. I think that stories will never dry up, will they? Every one of us has a story to tell.
Yeah.
But the fascinating thing, Moses, was that I grew up with Arthur Ransom. I don't know if you know that he, of Swallows and Amazons, also retold Russian fairy tales. And they were quite ghoulish and, babies with iron teeth, and it was quite scary, but I loved them. And of course, when I was putting this anthology together, I find the original of those Russian fairy tales comes from the Congo.
Oh.
And
that's
very interesting. By very early travelers from Africa, going north into Europe and telling stories for their supper in a time-honored tradition.
Okay, thank you so much, Magdalene. Yeah, I think it also speaks to how you know, the tales have traveled far and wide, and they've made, you know, being retold in different contexts. But I'll now move on to Babs. Baba Alwa, you know, I'm just wondering, with experience growing up in South Africa, if you've heard any wisdom tales, if so, which one was the most important, which you remember, if you are free to share with us.
Thank you, Moses. It's a very interesting question. I think if I recall to my childhood, I had a very Western upbringing, a very Anglican white upbringing. And so I think most of the stories growing up were biblical, I think, parables more than, I guess, African tales. I think also, I mean, we grew up with the Kathy and Mark readers. But if I were to think about a couple, I know I think about, you know, the tortoise and the hare was one of them. Yeah, I'm struggling to remember a lot of them, but I do think for me, what really resonates is in recent history, in my recent years, I think I've really had the opportunity to connect, I guess, with the beauty around my African identity. And so for me, I think what's quite powerful and what mirrors the stories that are in the Wisdom Tales book are the living stories that we hear every single day. I think back to just what the work that you're doing, Moses. I was part of quite recently a regional peace building conference, and you know, hearing these living stories of tenacity, of strength, of I guess really the personification of Ubuntu in our communities, I think is really powerful. And so I'm inspired a lot by those stories, but I'm also quite inspired by a story in the book, and I'm wondering if I can share, if I can read that story, if you'll indulge me for a minute or two, because I think it also really reflects really a powerful message about community and working in community and the type of postures we need to hold when we are in community. And in South Africa, we have a tradition. When we start a story, we say, so if you hear me say that, I'm saying, what I am saying is the story is starting. And so, yeah, I'm going to read from the book. The story is called How Tortoise Got His Shell. It's a story from Nigeria. And so, once upon a time, dear brothers and sisters, all the birds were invited to a great feast in the sky. They were very excited and began to prepare for the great day. They painted their bodies with red camwood and drew beautiful patterns on themselves with uli. Cunning Tortoise saw all the preparations and soon found out about the great feast in the sky. Nothing in the world of animals ever escaped his notice. His throat itched at the thought of the great feast. There was a famine in those days, and Tortoise had not eaten for 2 moons. His body rattled like a dry stick in his shell, and so he began to plan how he also would go to the great feast in the sky. You are right, dear brothers and sisters. Tortoise had no wings. He went to the birds and asked to be allowed to go with them. We know you too well, replied the birds. You are too full of cunning, and you are ungrateful. If we allow you to come with us, you will soon begin your mischief. You do not know me, said Tortoise. I've had a change of heart. I've learned that one who makes trouble for others, in the end, makes trouble the most for himself. Tortoise had such a sweet tongue that the birds all agreed he was a changed man. They each gave him a feather with which he made 2 wings. At last, the great day came, and the birds flew off together with Tortoise in the middle. Tortoise was very happy because not only had the birds allowed him to join them, they had also chosen to speak for the party. There is one custom that we must not forget, he declared as they flew on their way. When people are invited to a great feast like this one, they take new names for the occasion. Our hosts in the sky will expect us to honor this age-old tradition. The birds had not heard of this custom, but respected Tortoise as a widely traveled man who knew the customs of different people, and they each took a new name. Tortoise also took one. He was to be called All of You. At last, the party arrived in the sky, and their hosts were very happy to see them. Tortoise stood up in his many-colored plumage and thanked them for their invitation. His speech was so eloquent that all the birds were glad they had brought him, and nodded their heads in approval of everything he said. Their hosts took Tortoise to be king of the birds, especially as he looked somewhat different from the others. After kola nuts had been presented and eaten, the people of the sky set before their guests the most delectable dishes Tortoise had ever seen or dreamt of. Soup was brought out hot from the fire in the pot it had been cooked in. It was full of delicious meat and fish. Tortoise began rather rudely, dear brothers and sisters, to sniff aloud. There was pounded yam pottage with palm oil and fresh fish. There was also pots of palm wine. When everything had been set before the guests, one of the people of the sky came forward and tasted a little from each pot. He then invited the birds to eat, but Tortoise jumped to his feet and asked, "For whom have you prepared this feast?" "For all of you," replied the man. Tortoise turned to the birds and said, "You remember that my name is All of You. The custom here is to serve the spokesman first and the others later. They will serve you when I have eaten." He began to eat, and the birds grumbled angrily. The people of the sky thought it must be the birds' custom to leave all the food for their king, and so Tortoise ate the best part of the food and drank 2 pots of palm wine. He was so full of food and drink that his body filled out in his shell. The birds gathered round to eat what was left and to peck at the bones Tortoise had thrown all about on the floor. Some of them were too angry to eat. Instead, they chose to fly home on an empty stomach. But before they left, each bird took back the feather he had lent to the tortoise. When the time came to leave, there Tortoise stood in his hard shell, full of food and wine, but without any wings to fly home. He asked the birds to help him get home, but they all refused. He begged the birds to take a message to his wife, but they all refused. In the end, Parrot, who had felt angrier than the others, suddenly changed his mind and agreed to take the message. "Tell my wife," said Tortoise, "to bring out all the soft things in my house and cover the compound with them so that I can jump down from the sky without great danger." Parrot promised to deliver the message and then flew away. When Parrot reached Tortoise's house, he told his wife to bring out all the hard things in the house, and so she brought out her husband's hoes, hatchets, spears, guns, and even his cannon. Tortoise looked down from the sky and saw his wife bringing things out, but it was too far away to see what they were. When all seemed ready, he let himself go. Tortoise fell and fell and fell until he began to fear that he would never stop falling. And then, just like the sound of his cannon, he crashed into the compound. Tortoise's shell shattered into many pieces. He was a broken man, but his good and generous wife took pity on him. Fortunately, there was a great medicine man in the neighborhood. Tortoise's wife sent for him, and together they gathered all the bits of shell, and taking great care, toiled for many hours until every piece of shell had been glued back into place. Tortoise was much humbled by his experience and indeed became a changed man. And that, dear brothers and sisters, is why Tortoise's shell is the way it is. beautiful, beautiful story, I think. I'm so
Indeed.
interested, Magdalene, why particularly that story, and what is the message that resonates with it for you?
Oh, I think every child that heard that story immediately decided that they would not ever boast again. They would not presume to be the best and to be the first. It was a great favorite amongst the children, I have to say. You read it very beautifully.
That is true. I got really immersed in the story. And I think it's the kind of story where children really understand what it means to be a selfish individual as compared to an observer, and not exactly knowing what to do because something is happening that shouldn't be happening. It's just such illustrative of what it means to be a part of a community and how you share, and the expectations of sharing. It's a wonderful lesson or series of lessons, and I think that's the beauty of the wisdom tales, that each one has a number of lessons that are a part of them.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering, there's a proverb from West Africa, from the Hossa people, that is similar to the story of Anansi, and it goes, God gives blessings to all men, and that's where we started out today. And I think that that's the beauty again of the wisdom tales. And so, I was wondering about the illustrations that are part of the book. They are exquisite. And I'm wondering, Magdalene, if you could tell us a little bit about them.
I was so fortunate to meet a 17-year-old student at my children's school. And she was doing advanced art, and she was planning to go to go and study art at the school in Scotland, in Edinburgh. And I asked her whether she would be interested in illustrating some of the stories and then using the artwork towards her portfolio, and she was very, very happy to do this. And she went on to get a very good degree in Scotland, and she is an artist, but it's very hard making a living just as an artist. She takes commissions, she has exhibitions occasionally in her town, which is Dunblane, near where we used to live in Perthshire in Scotland. And I'm in touch with her from time to time. But she just caught the essence of each story, I believe, so beautifully. And her animal drawings, hyena and guinea fowl and hare, they're all so perfectly observed. I think she has a very rare and beautiful talent.
It's amazing to think that a 17-year-old illustrated this book. I would have never, ever thought it. It's just so incredibly wonderful. And, Babs, you did such a wonderful rendition of the story. I'm wondering if you might do the same. There's another story that's in the book about the lost amulet, the lost bracelet. And I'm wondering if you could read that for us.
Sure, absolutely. The The Lost Amulet. It's a Nyanja tale from Malawi. Long, long ago, dear brothers and sisters, when all living creatures could talk to each other, there lived a chief who had a son called Ndagi. Ndagi loved to swim in the river that flowed near his village, and all the water creatures that lived in the river were his friends. One day, Ndagi dived from a high rock into the river. When he climbed out again, he found that the precious amulet that his father, the chief, had hung around his neck in order to protect him from all harm was missing. Ndagi called anxiously to all the water creatures, "Please help me to find my precious amulet." Immediately, all his good friends, the water creatures, came and searched the river. They had to help Ndagi find his precious amulet before any harm came to their young friend. Catfish searched under every stone. Lake salmon swam up and down looking in all the riverbank caves. Crab hunted in every crevice. Turtle scuttled back and forth across the riverbed, and minnow wove in amongst all the water seeds, looking everywhere. Even eel, who always swam alone, slithered and squeezed behind each and every rock until his bright eyes were piercing the gloomy depths. But it was all in vain. The precious amulet was nowhere to be seen. Just then Mvu, the river king, came and listened to the story of the missing amulet. Mvu said, "One of you water creatures has taken Ndagi's precious amulet." And in a commanding voice, he asked, "Who is it?" All the water creatures kept quiet. Then Mvu cried, giving a stern look to each one of them in turn, "Come to my cave when the moon is in the sky, and we will settle this." Now, dear brothers and sisters, all the water creatures were very afraid because they knew that Mvu understood many secrets. He would undoubtedly be able to find Ndagi's precious amulet using his knowledge of ancient magic. When the silver moon was shining high in the sky, Ndagi, crab, minnow, catfish, lake salmon, turtle, and shy eel swam to Mvu's cave. As they entered the cave, rockfish began to beat a slow rhythm on his drum. Ndagi and the water creatures swam towards Mvu, the river king, who had a great golden bowl set on the rock before him. Mvu turned his tail 3 times around the rim of the bowl, thus causing the ancient magic to secretly start working. Then he commanded them all, "Swim 3 times around this bowl." Ndagi, crab, minnow, who was trembling a little, catfish, lake salmon, turtle, and eel did as he asked. Then Mvu looked carefully at each of them and saw that tears were streaming down Minnow's face. Mvu pointed a golden fin at tiny Minnow. "The ancient magic has revealed that you took the precious amulet. Go and fetch it quickly and give it back to Ndagi immediately." Poor Minnow was so ashamed and humbly begged for forgiveness. "I had hoped that the precious amulet would make me more important," he sobbed. "And that is why, dear ones, even to this day, little minnows get chased away by all the other water creatures."
So,
Such an inspiring tale, I think. I really enjoyed that one. I really enjoy it. I think it's back to that question of who's important and who's not important and what makes us feel important. I think so beautifully is illustrated in that story, but also I think it also connects us back to that idea of conscience, and that Minnow was crying at the end, I think makes us think about the idea that we know what's right and we know what's wrong. And our conscience is a very powerful thing that can really, that I think should be the driver around how we do things and how we engage and how we see each other and how we treat each other. But also the power of honesty, I think, is also quite beautiful in that one as well.
It's a great story. And Moses, I know that you were going to, do the next bullet point that we had talked about, but because of your internet troubles, I think maybe I'm going to ask Magdalene her reactions to this. And this probably was one of my favorite proverbs that was in the book, and it's from the Sudan. And the proverb is, we desire to bequeath, to give two things to our children. The first is roots and the other is wings. And so, Magdalene, I'm wondering, in raising your children, did you find this proverb to be a challenge or a comfort?
Both, I would say. Yes, both. Challenge always to remind them and bring them back to their roots. And of course, Aziz and I came from different cultures and different religions, so we had some bridges to build there. Wasn't always easy, and can be very challenging for children. Suffice it to say that now that they're all in their 40s, they're beautiful human beings. I'm very, very proud of them all as members of society and how they contribute in their own individual and unique ways. And this has to lie at the heart of everything, that we all are encouraged as children to be deeply true to ourselves. And then the rest of our life almost takes care of itself, in a sense.
Yeah, I'm reminded, a part of that proverb about, giving your children wings. I'm reminded of the writing of Kahlil Gibran, his poem on children, that your children are not your children, that, they belong to all of common humanity, and that you might think that you can keep them in your sphere, but in truth, they really need those wings to fly and make life their own. It is amazing, as you read wisdom tales or tales from any culture, it's so interesting to see those collective threads that pass through each one of the cultures. And so, Moses, I'm wondering if let's see if your internet is going, and see if you might join us.
Yes, Madeline, I'm here.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So I think relate with how we change the industry in roots and wings. But there's a story which is one of the last stories in the Wisdom Tales, which is about the quail. I wonder if Babalo if you can read for us the story.
Right. Thank you, Moses. And Babs, you're becoming our official storyteller today, and it's just wonderful to hear your voice. And I think we're going to learn a lesson from the story, The Quarrel.
All right, The Quarrel, an East African story. Long ago, in a time before time, the animals began to argue about which of them was the most excellent of all. I am, said Tortoise, because I am the wisest. I am, roared lion, because I am the most feared. I am, hissed python, because I am the most deadly. I am, cried fish eagle, because I can soar the highest. I am, argued baboon, because I can travel the furthest. I am, trumpeted elephant, because I am the strongest. I am, snorted horse, because I am the most handsome. I am, snapped cheetah, because I am the fastest. I am, bellowed hippopotamus, because I live on land and in water. Porcupine listened to all the animals arguing about which of them was the most excellent, and at last he spoke up. We are all excellent in our different ways. Let us not argue with each other. And all the animals stopped quarreling and agreed that it was better to live in harmony with each other. And so, dear ones, from that day to this, Porcupine was called Peacemaker.
Wow, that's a beautiful, beautiful story. So I'll just pose this question to you, Magdalene, and also other participants here on the platform. On what are your thoughts of what does this story tell us about, human nature? Or what reflection can it be?
Sorry, Moses, what was what?
What does the story tell us about human nature when you reflect on this story?
Couldn't quite catch that. I think my audio isn't as good as it could be.
Well, I think basically, if you could speak to that story and how it relates to just human nature generally, how it might reflect maybe, the people who we surround ourselves with. What does it tell us?
Well, it underlines for me very much that although Porcupine, well known for his spiny prickles and perhaps being a bit untouchable in some ways, actually, he came up with the idea that we're all important. We all should be grateful for our own talents and see that every one of us has something to contribute to the greater good. I am because you are. Ubuntu is just everywhere through that story too, isn't it? That we all thrive because of the other. And children always seem to get this very accurately. And love the stories about, listening to the one that's the fastest, the one that's boasting because he's the most handsome. All children seem to identify and then follow the idea that the peacemaker actually has the truth of the matter.
Yeah.
And we're all important in our own ways. We all have talent to share. And we should all be encouraging each other.
I think that's a wonderful way to end because it helps us look at our own personal culture in a different way, to the diversity that is a part of any group in which we exist. And I think the thirst that we have to learn about people who are different from ourselves, because oftentimes, without knowing who those people might be, we come with prejudice or with our own personal wisdom that needs to be cracked a little bit, like that tortoise shell. Because getting to know one another differently is so very important. And I think that there are just hundreds of lessons to be learned from the wisdom tales. Thank you so much, Magdalene, for obviously all the time that you needed to put in to bring us this compilation of stories. And Moses, thank you for helping to guide us, even though your internet is causing trouble. But nonetheless, you know, you helped set the stage. And Babs, you get the award for being the super storyteller. It just, I have to say, you're really good at this because I find myself getting so immersed in the story and your little nuances of change that you bring to the different voices of the animals was just really wonderful. Thank you all. And Lynn, I think you might have a few slides that you want to share.
I have a few slides and I will share screen. Let's see, here we are. On Monday, our Charter for Compassion Institute, the CEI, will start a course with Rick Hansen. Just 1 minute, 57 practices to build a happier, healthier mind in just a minute or two a day. And we have, as the Charter, a special code. This course is normally offered at $49, but for CEI students, it's $44.10, a 10% discount. And so you can register through our website. And then we have on the 16th, next Thursday, the EdNet Forum. And we will have Scarlett Lewis from the Jessie Lewis Choose Love Foundation, which she started. And Jessie Lewis was one of the children that was killed in a mass shooting in Connecticut in a school a number of years ago. And then we have the Charter Sangha, which is on the 25th of November. We have it on the last Saturday of every month, and it starts at 9 o'clock in the morning. It's an hour and a half. It's always a wonderful community, and everyone is welcome to join us. And that is what we have planned for the month of November.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us, and we hope to see you real soon in either a global read, a course, or any of the other events that are offered by the Charter.
Thank you very much, Babs, and thank you very much, Moses and Magdalene, of course.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank
Everyone.
you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, and bye.